makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
The British Parliament approved a controversial new tax reform proposed by Boris Johnson a few days ago that adds a 1.5 increase to national insurance in order to pay for the NHS's COVID costs, as well as in the longer run for social care. Now, I want to talk a bit about this reform because while it is definitely true that Britain needs additional revenue for these expenses, the way in which the tax reform was constructed puts the burden on working people and therefore is kind of exactly what you would have expected a right-wing government like Boris Johnson's to come up with. So let's discuss the plan, how it works. So the plan supposedly will raise about 12 billion a year, of which the majority will come from a 1.25 percentage point increase in national insurance contributions. So in practice, this is actually a 2.5 percentage point increases because national insurance, unlike income tax, is paid by both the employee and the employer. So for those of you who aren't British, income tax in Britain is basically separated into two parts. Income tax, the standard income tax, and national insurance. And national insurance is paid by both sides. So the first question that one will have is whether this tax is progressive or not. And it's a bit mixed here. So the increase itself is progressive. And if you look at this chart, you will see that as your salary increases, the increase in your new national insurance contributions is proportionally higher the bigger your salary is. So if you have a salary of 20,000, your national insurance contribution is 1,252. The increase is slightly over 10%. Whereas if you earn 130, you pay 6,479, and the increase is 1,505. So it's actually more than 20%. So it is progressive in that respect. Unfortunately, national insurance itself is not a progressive tax. It's highly regressive. And that's because of the way that it's levied. So up to 50,000 in income, you only pay 9% plus I think a small weekly sum of I think like £3 something. So in practice that's about 12%. So up to 50,000 you pay 12%. But then after 60,000, you only pay 2% plus that fixed weekly amount. So if you look at here, the last column, your total national insurance contributions go up as a percentage of your income up to 50,000. So it's progressive up to 50,000. But then it becomes incredibly regressive after that point. Someone who earns 130,000 will only pay 6% of national insurance. So it is highly regressive in that sense. Now the other component is there will also be a tax on share dividends increased by 1.25%, but this is only going to raise an additional 600 million. So it's only a fraction of 12 billion. So you can see that working people who are the ones who pay national insurance are the ones who are going to be footing this bill. Now, so what is this going to pay for? First of all, for the next couple of years, it's going to pay for the NHS's backlog caused by the pandemic. And that's a good thing, obviously. The government estimates that there's about a 3-year backlog of operations and treatments that have been postponed because of the pandemic. So the idea is to get the NHS to catch up as much as it can. That's a good thing. Now, I've heard even worse numbers than this. I've heard some experts say that it could be as long as 10 years. I guess this depends on exactly what type of treatment. Some will have bigger delays than others, but still, these are pretty frightening numbers. So I don't think anyone disagrees that the NHS needs more money. The other aspect is social care. So once the NHS has its backlog sorted out, the revenues from this new income will go into paying social care. And there's going to be a reform to the cost of social care, which I actually think this is good. So let's look at what happens now. As it is now, people which have assets of less than 23,250, their social care is paid by the state. Beyond this, it's out of pocket, and it can be incredibly expensive. A lot of old people end up selling their homes to pay for their social care once they need to go to a nursing home. And the monthly costs of living in a nursing home are huge. It can be as much as 4,000 a month or more. So it's a massive amount of money. Now, what this new reform does is from October of 2023, the threshold for which the state will pay all of it falls to 20,000. Not huge, but it's better than nothing. And beyond that, there will be a cap of 86,000 on total care costs. So once you paid 86,000, the state will pay the rest. So that is a good thing. That gives you an idea that this is the most that social care can possibly cost you. So yeah, this is a good thing, I think. Surprisingly generous from a Tory government, but then maybe they just want to appease their old pensioner voting base. I don't know. But anyway, now let's look at the analysis from the IFS. So the IFS is the Institute of Fiscal Studies. It's a very renowned think tank on fiscal matters in the UK. Most importantly, it is very much a non-partisan think tank. I find it to be very neutral, very unbiased. So what's their take on this? Their take on this is basically that this should have been an increase in the income tax, not in the national insurance contributions, because income tax is spread more evenly across generations. So it is also problematic that after, I believe, the first year or the first 2 years, I don't recall, this is going to stop being an increase in the national insurance rate, and instead it's going to be levied as a separate tax. So now there's going to be 3 separate income taxes in Britain: income tax, national insurance, and this new health and social care levy. So this will add unnecessary complexity. Now, here's the IFS kind of their main take. It's disappointing that the government did not find a better package of tax measures to fund the spending increase. A simple increase in income tax would have been preferable. But overall, much needed reforms to social care are being introduced, and unavoidable pressures on the NHS are being funded through a broad-based and broadly progressive tax increase that is better than doing nothing. So I do kind of disagree on this broadly progressive, because I think it's only progressive within the tax base that it covers. So it's only progressive when you consider this bit, the actual increase. It's not progressive in the sense that it doesn't change the progressivity of national insurance as a whole. Though, once it's taken separately, as its own separate tax, it will be, I guess, progressive, from a purely mathematical perspective. Anyway, here's how historically important this is. So this is, I believe, the largest single tax rise in modern British history, in terms of any increases given in any budget or, out of budget. And this will raise Britain's taxation, their tax burden as a share of national income to the highest level since the 1960s. So that is huge. And here's, again, the argument that the IFS is given on why it's unfair generationally is, you can see it on this chart. So as it is, only 2% of people 66 or older pay national insurance. Or, well, the contribution of national insurance, only 2% is from people 66 or older. The bulk of it, almost 2/3, comes from people under 50, so working people, young people. Now, income tax is much more evenly spread. 14% of income tax is generated from people 66% or older. So that's the argument on why this should have been more focused on the income tax side than on the national insurance side. And finally, the other argument on the added complexity, which I fully agree with. So The new health and social care levy will effectively be a third income tax. The changes could have been realized much more straightforwardly through changes to national insurance contributions and to the rate of income tax charge on dividends. Yeah, of course. Adding a new tax will unnecessarily add additional complexity. The government has been clear that the revenues will be used for health and social care funding, but this is a weak form of hypothecation. The revenues raised from the levy are small relative to the overall amount spent on health and social care. There is no real sense in which the amount actually raised through the health and social care levy will affect the total amount spent on health and social care in the years to come. Now, whether, we need to talk about the fairness of this all, because we've only discussed how progressive it is within this, this narrow framework. But the main question with any tax reform is, could the government have raised this revenue, this 12 billion, from other sources that would not have affected workers? And the answer, of course, is yes, because there are huge pools of untaxed income and untaxed wealth in a country like the UK. The only reason why this pool of potential tax revenues is not taxed is because of political interest. The Boris Johnson government, the Tories in general, do not want to tax pensioners because that's their main voting base. Old people vote Tory in Britain. Young people vote Labour. That's the rule. And also, they don't want to affect the interest of the corporate class or the rentier class, which I think the rentier class, and by this I mean landlords, both commercial and residential, and basically just people who live on income, on rental income or dividends or any form of income that isn't actually working. These people should be the first in line to get taxed. I mean, this is, I think a basic standard. You will not start taxing working people until you've taxed non-working people as much as possible. And they're not going to do that. So earlier today, it was revealed that Amazon paid only £500 million, less than £500 million in UK tax, despite the fact that their sales surged to 20.6 billion. So they're paying less than 5%. Of their revenues in taxes. And I think this is probably like the highest proportion that they've paid in recent years. And certainly other companies like Facebook and Google have often paid absolute pittances. Like there's been years where these companies pay like less than an individual. So it's disgraceful. Why aren't the tech giants being taxed? Why aren't other corporations being taxed? Why aren't all the loopholes in all the British governed little tax haven islands around the world? Why aren't they closed? They're never going to do that, of course, because those are the main benefactors of the Tory party. Now, the rentier class is another source of taxation. House prices in Britain have gone through the roof because of the pandemic. So, according to one study, the annual rate of property inflation in Britain in England and Northern Ireland was 13.2% in June. That's huge. So, again, why isn't the rentier class paying the COVID bill? Because they escaped pretty much unscathed. The rich escaped pretty much unscathed. The FTSE 100 is practically at the same level now that it is before the pandemic. So rich people have not been affected by the pandemic. And they should be first in line to pay the cost, out of fairness. Now, there was some talk that there was going to be a bit of a Tory backbench rebellion over this tax plan, because believe it or not, there actually are Tories, a few of them, who are committed to the idea, classic conservative ideas of low taxes and small government. I tend to at least respect them for being ideologically consistent, even if I don't agree with their ideology. But this rebellion did not really materialize, unfortunately, and I kind of expected it not to. They always create a buzz about possible rebellions against Boris Johnson, but then when it comes to it, they don't. So they're in lockstep with whatever Boris Johnson does, and only 5 conservatives voted against the changes. And yeah, mostly practically the entire opposition, I think the entire Labour Party voted against it for obvious reasons, as they said they would, and as they definitely should have done. But unfortunately, in a parliamentary system like Britain, the opposition really doesn't have much power. They're not able to block legislation. There is no Supreme Court that will strike down the constitutionality of a bill. Unlike the United States, for example, in Britain, an act of parliament is considered the law of the land, and the Supreme Court cannot strike it down. And in parliamentary systems, the ruling party is a ruling party because it has a parliamentary majority. So, on one hand, I've after living in Britain for so long, I've become sympathetic to parliamentary systems much more. I think they have a lot of advantages over presidential system that I didn't really consider before. You can definitely get more things done in a parliamentary system than a presidential one. That's for sure. And looking at the absolute dysfunction of the U.S. right now, it's even more obvious. But I mean, the problem, of course, if you have an awful government like this, is they'll pass everything. Nothing will really stop them. And so, yeah, that's the story. I think I'm going to register as a taxpayer now in Mexico. I've been here now for 9 months. I should be paying my taxes here, not in Britain, to fund Boris Johnson's regime. Maybe I should apply for non-dom status and not pay taxes in Britain. I mean, if the rich do it, why can't I? But anyway, that's the scoop. If you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe. See you next time.